Hello, my dear friends. Tonight we begin a long and gentle journey through the ancient world, guided by something small, quiet, and deeply important to everyday life. This is the story of olive oil, not as a modern ingredient, but as a substance that slowly became essential to human survival, comfort, and routine across many ancient civilizations. As you listen, allow your breathing to slow and your thoughts to rest. This is not a story of sudden change or dramatic events. It is a slow story, shaped by time, patience, and daily repetition. Thousands of years ago, long before written history recorded the details of everyday life, people living around the Mediterranean discovered that the fruit of the olive tree held remarkable value. Olive trees grew slowly, often taking many years before producing fruit, but once they matured, they continued to give for generations. Ancient communities learned that planting olive trees was not just an agricultural decision, but a commitment to the future. Families planted trees knowing their children and grandchildren would benefit from them. This long-term thinking made the olive tree a symbol of continuity and stability across the ancient world. The process of turning olives into oil was slow and careful. Olives were harvested by hand, often by entire families working together. They were crushed using stone tools, and the oil was pressed out gradually. Nothing about this process was rushed. The oil that flowed from the crushed olives was collected patiently, filtered naturally, and stored in clay jars. Because this work required time and cooperation, olive oil became closely connected to communal life. Villages pressed oil together, shared knowledge, and passed techniques down through generations. This slow production matched the pace of ancient life, where daily routines followed the rhythms of nature rather than the clock. At first, olive oil was valued simply because it was useful. It provided a stable source of fat in diets that relied heavily on grains and vegetables. Bread dipped in olive oil became a common and reliable meal, especially for working families. Olive oil made food more filling and easier to digest, supporting people through long days of physical labor. In warm climates, where animal fat spoiled quickly, olive oil offered a practical alternative. It could be stored for long periods without losing its usefulness, making it a dependable part of daily nutrition. As its usefulness became clear, olive oil slowly expanded into other areas of life. It became fuel for lamps, bringing light into homes after sunset. Small clay lamps filled with oil produced a steady, gentle flame that allowed families to gather in the evening. This light extended the day without harsh brightness, creating calm and intimate spaces inside ancient homes. Olive oil lamps were used everywhere, from simple houses to temples and public buildings. The same oil that fed the body now supported social life after dark. Over time, olive oil also became closely connected to the human body. Ancient people learned that oil protected skin from dryness, sun, and dust. In places where water was limited, oil was used to clean the body, scraped away along with dirt and sweat. This method kept skin healthy and reduced irritation. Athletes, particularly in ancient Greece, used olive oil before and after physical activity. The oil was believed to strengthen muscles and prepare the body for effort. Through daily use, olive oil became part of personal care routines across cultures. This growing dependence on olive oil did not happen quickly. It developed over centuries, shaped by experience rather than theory. People observed what worked and continued those practices. Olive oil earned its place not through belief alone, but through daily results. It fed families, lit homes, protected bodies, and supported health. By the time early civilizations began recording their histories, olive oil was already deeply embedded in daily life. As this first part comes to rest, imagine an ancient household at the end of the day. A clay lamp glows softly in the corner, filled with olive oil pressed months earlier. Bread rests nearby, ready to be eaten with a simple dip of oil. Outside, olive trees stand quietly under the night sky, their presence steady and patient. This is where our long story begins, rooted in routine, usefulness, and time. Historical evidence shows that olive oil became central to daily life, first in the eastern Mediterranean, where climate and geography supported the growth of olive trees. Archaeological findings from the Levant, Anatolia, and the Aegean region indicate that olive cultivation began several thousand years before the rise of large empires. Early communities discovered that olives could be preserved and transformed into oil that lasted far longer than fresh food. This discovery changed how ancient societies thought about food storage, seasonal survival, and long-term planning. Olive oil allowed households to bridge the gap between harvests, providing a reliable resource throughout the year. In ancient Egypt, olive oil entered daily life through trade rather than large-scale local production. Egypt's climate was not ideal for widespread olive cultivation, but historical records and tomb reliefs show that olive oil was imported and highly valued. Egyptian households used olive oil primarily for lighting, body care, and ritual purposes. Lamps fueled by olive oil illuminated homes, temples, and tombs. Oils were also used in religious ceremonies, where purity and preservation were essential concepts. Olive oil's ability to resist decay made it symbolically connected to protection and continuity, which aligned closely with Egyptian beliefs about life and the afterlife. Medical papyri from ancient Egypt mention oils mixed with herbs for treatment of wounds and skin conditions. While several oils were used, olive oil held a special place due to its smooth texture and stability. It was applied to the skin to prevent dryness caused by the desert climate and was used in preparation of bodies during burial rituals. This consistent presence in both daily care and sacred practice reinforced olive oil's importance in Egyptian life, even though it was not produced locally in large quantities. In the Aegean world, particularly among the Minoans and Mycenaeans, olive oil became a foundational agricultural product. Archaeological excavations in Crete reveal large storage jars, oil presses, and trade records indicating organized olive oil production as early as the Bronze Age. These societies developed techniques for cultivating olive trees, pressing oil, and storing it safely for transport. Olive oil became a commodity that supported palace economies and regional trade networks. It was distributed to workers, offered in rituals, and exchanged with neighboring regions. In ancient Greece, olive oil moved from a practical resource to a cultural cornerstone. Historical texts and archaeological evidence show that olive oil was central to daily meals, athletic practices, and religious life. Greek households relied on olive oil as their primary cooking fat. Grain-based diets depended on oil to add nutrition and energy. Olive oil lamps lit homes and public spaces, making it part of everyday routine from sunrise to sunset. Its presence in nearly every aspect of life made it indispensable rather than optional. Greek athletic culture further elevated olive oil's role. Athletes coated their bodies with oil before training and competition, believing it protected the skin and prepared the muscles. After exercise, oil was scraped away along with dust and sweat, serving as a form of cleansing. This practice is well documented in art and literature, showing olive oil as part of disciplined daily routine rather than luxury. These repeated uses reinforced its necessity in both ordinary and specialized contexts. Religious practice in Greece also relied heavily on olive oil. Temples used oil for lamps that burned continuously, symbolizing order and divine presence. Olive oil was offered to gods during ceremonies and festivals. The olive tree itself became sacred, associated with deities and civic identity. Historical laws protected olive groves, recognizing their economic and cultural importance. This legal protection reflects how deeply olive oil production was tied to the stability of Greek society. By this stage in history, olive oil was no longer simply a useful substance. It had become integrated into systems of agriculture, trade, religion, medicine, and daily routine. Its value was reinforced by repetition and necessity rather than rarity. Olive oil endured because it worked, meeting practical needs across different cultures while adapting to local customs and beliefs. This adaptability allowed it to spread steadily across the ancient world, carried by traders, settlers, and empires. Historical evidence shows that the expansion of olive oil across the ancient world accelerated as Greek communities spread through colonization and trade between the 8th and 5th centuries BCE. As Greek settlers established new cities along the coasts of the Mediterranean and Black Sea, they carried with them familiar agricultural practices. Olive trees were planted wherever climate and soil allowed, turning olive oil into a marker of cultural continuity. Archaeological remains of presses, storage jars, and shipping containers found in southern Italy, Sicily, North Africa, and the western Mediterranean demonstrate that olive oil production followed Greek settlement patterns closely. This spread was not sudden but gradual, shaped by local conditions and long-term cultivation. Within Greek city-states, olive oil became firmly embedded in economic organization. Land records and inscriptions indicate that olive groves were carefully managed assets, often owned by families over generations. The slow growth of olive trees encouraged stability, as groves represented long-term investment rather than quick profit. This encouraged settled life and careful land stewardship. Olive oil was collected, stored, and distributed through systems that supported both household use and trade. Surplus oil moved through regional markets, connecting inland farms with coastal ports and foreign buyers. The rise of the Roman Republic marked a new phase in the history of olive oil. Romans adopted olive oil not as a foreign luxury, but as a practical necessity that fit their expanding way of life. Early Roman agriculture incorporated olive cultivation alongside grain and grapes, forming the foundation of what later historians described as the Mediterranean agricultural triad. As Roman territory expanded, olive oil production expanded with it. Roman writers describe olive groves as essential features of productive land, and legal texts show that olive cultivation was encouraged and protected by the state. Roman households relied heavily on olive oil for daily living. Historical accounts and archaeological evidence from kitchens, lamps, and storage areas show consistent use across social classes. Olive oil was used for cooking simple meals, lighting homes, and maintaining personal hygiene. Roman bath culture, which developed gradually, relied on oil for cleansing the body before bathing. This practice spread throughout the empire, reinforcing olive oil's importance far beyond its original growing regions. Trade networks under Roman control allowed olive oil to move on an unprecedented scale. Amphorae stamped with production marks have been found across Europe, North Africa, and the Near East, showing standardized systems of transport and distribution. Large estates in regions such as southern Spain, North Africa, and Italy produced olive oil specifically for export. This large-scale production did not replace household use, but expanded it, making olive oil widely available even in areas where olives could not grow. The consistency of amphora design and labeling reflects the importance of olive oil as a regulated and valued commodity. Religious and civic life under Roman rule also relied on olive oil. Temples used oil for lamps and offerings, continuing earlier traditions while integrating them into Roman practice. Public buildings were lit by oil lamps, and civic ceremonies often involved the use of oil as a symbol of order and continuity. Roman law recognized olive groves as protected property, reflecting their importance to both economy and culture. These protections ensured that olive oil remained a stable resource throughout periods of political change. By the height of the Roman Empire, olive oil had become essential not because of symbolic meaning alone, but because daily life depended on it. Its uses were practical, repeated, and deeply ingrained. Cooking, lighting, hygiene, medicine, and ritual all relied on the same substance. This widespread dependence meant that olive oil production was closely tied to imperial stability. Disruptions in supply could affect daily routines across vast regions, demonstrating how central olive oil had become to ancient life. Historically, the success of olive oil across the ancient world can be traced to its adaptability. It fit into different diets, climates, and cultural practices while maintaining its core functions. Greek and Roman societies did not impose olive oil by force. They adopted and spread it because it worked. Through centuries of use, olive oil became an ordinary necessity rather than a remarkable product. Its quiet presence in homes, markets, temples, and workshops made it one of the most enduring elements of ancient daily life. Historical records from the Roman period show that olive oil became deeply woven into the structure of everyday urban life. As Roman cities expanded, daily routines increasingly depended on systems that required a steady supply of oil. Archaeological evidence from urban housing blocks known as insulae reveals widespread use of oil lamps in private rooms, stairways, and shared spaces. These lamps required regular refilling, making olive oil a constant necessity rather than an occasional resource. City life after sunset depended on the soft, steady light produced by oil, and this reliance made olive oil an invisible but essential part of urban stability. Roman public life further increased demand for olive oil. Bath complexes, which became central to Roman social culture, relied heavily on oil for cleansing practices. Historical descriptions and material evidence show that bathers applied olive oil to their bodies before scraping it away along with dirt and sweat. This practice was repeated daily by large numbers of people across the empire. As public baths expanded in size and number, the demand for olive oil grew accordingly. This transformed olive oil from a household product into a commodity essential to public infrastructure. Economic records and archaeological finds indicate that olive oil production was carefully organized to meet this demand. Large agricultural estates, particularly in provinces such as Hispania Baetica in modern Spain and parts of North Africa, specialized in olive cultivation. These regions produced oil in quantities far exceeding local needs. Amphorae stamped with producer marks and found in Rome and other major cities show a highly structured supply system. Olive oil was transported by ship and river, then distributed through markets and state channels. This system allowed urban populations to rely on distant agricultural regions for daily necessities. Roman administrative systems also played a role in integrating olive oil into daily life. In some cases, olive oil was distributed as a part of state-supported provisions, especially in large cities. While grain distributions are better documented, evidence suggests that oil was also included in certain contexts, particularly for public institutions. This integration into administrative supply systems reinforced olive oil's status as a basic resource rather than a luxury item. Its regular availability supported predictable daily routines for large populations. Religious practice in Roman cities further reinforced the importance of olive oil. Temples required constant lighting, and oil lamps burned continuously in sacred spaces. Ritual offerings often included oil, continuing traditions inherited from earlier cultures. The consistency of these practices across the empire meant that olive oil was consumed daily, not only in homes, but also in civic and religious life. This constant demand ensured that production and distribution remained stable even during periods of political change. Historical evidence from household inventories and commercial records suggests that olive oil was used across social classes. Wealthy households stored oil in large quantities, while poorer families purchased smaller amounts regularly. Despite differences in scale, the function remained the same. Olive oil was necessary for cooking, lighting, and basic hygiene. Its presence in nearly every home demonstrates how deeply it was embedded in daily life. Unlike luxury goods, olive oil did not signal status through ownership, but through reliable use. Urban infrastructure itself adapted to olive oil dependence. Storage facilities, markets, and transport routes were designed to accommodate large volumes of oil. The accumulation of broken amphorae at sites such as Monte Testaccio in Rome, formed almost entirely from discarded oil containers, provides striking physical evidence of the scale of consumption. This site alone reflects centuries of steady use, revealing how central olive oil had become to urban life. From a historical perspective, Roman urban society could not function smoothly without olive oil. Its role extended beyond the household into public, religious, and economic systems. The regular rhythms of city life depended on its steady flow. Olive oil's importance was not symbolic or occasional, but structural. It supported the basic activities that allowed cities to operate day after day, year after year. Historical evidence from the Roman countryside shows that olive oil was just as essential in rural life as it was in cities, though its role there was shaped by farming rhythms and seasonal labor. In rural communities, olive oil was not only a finished product but the result of long agricultural effort. Olive trees required careful tending over many years, and families organized their lives around planting, pruning, and harvesting cycles. This long-term investment tied households closely to the land and encouraged stability. Rural families depended on olive oil as a reliable resource that could sustain them through periods of scarcity, making it central to survival rather than comfort. Farming records and archaeological remains of presses demonstrate that olive oil production was a communal activity in many regions. Villages often shared presses, bringing harvested olives together during pressing season. This process reinforced social cooperation and shared responsibility. Olive oil produced during these periods was divided for household use, storage, and trade. Because oil could be stored for long periods, it allowed rural families to plan ahead, reducing uncertainty caused by poor harvests of other crops. This stability was especially important in regions where climate conditions could be unpredictable. In Roman provinces, olive oil production became a key economic activity that connected rural areas to distant markets. Provinces such as Hispania, Africa, Proconsularis, and parts of the eastern Mediterranean developed extensive olive groves. These regions supplied oil not only to local populations but also to major urban centers. Historical analysis of amphorae distribution shows that oil produced in rural estates traveled long distances, often ending up in Rome itself. This movement of oil linked small farming communities to imperial trade networks, integrating rural life into the broader economic system. Rural households relied on olive oil for the same daily purposes as urban ones, though often with greater emphasis on practicality. Olive oil was used to prepare simple meals based on grain and vegetables, providing essential calories for physical labor. It fueled lamps in farmhouses, extending work into early evening hours when necessary. It was used for basic body care, protecting skin from sun and dirt after long days in the fields. In these settings, olive oil was valued not for refinement, but for reliability. Historical sources suggest that olive oil also played a role in managing labor relationships in rural areas. Large estates distributed oil to workers as part of rations or compensation. This practice reinforced olive oil's status as a necessity rather than a luxury. Providing oil supported the health and productivity of laborers, ensuring the smooth functioning of agricultural operations. Such distributions demonstrate how deeply olive oil was integrated into economic structures beyond simple household use. Rural religious practices further reflected the importance of olive oil. Small shrines and household rituals relied on oil lamps and offerings, mirroring practices seen in larger urban temples. These rituals reinforced continuity between rural and urban religious life. Olive oil thus connected farming communities not only to markets, but also to shared cultural and spiritual traditions across the empire. From a historical perspective, rural dependence on olive oil highlights its foundational role in ancient society. It supported daily survival, economic exchange, and social cohesion. In the countryside, olive oil was not an accessory to life, but a core element that shaped routines and relationships. Its steady presence in rural households ensured that olive oil remained essential across all levels of ancient life, from isolated farms to the heart of empire. Historical sources from across the ancient Mediterranean show that olive oil played a central role in hygiene and health long before the development of modern medical systems. In many regions, regular bathing with water alone was impractical due to climate, water scarcity, or daily labor conditions. Olive oil offered a practical alternative. People applied oil to the skin and then removed it with simple scraping tools, taking dirt, sweat, and impurities with it. Archaeological finds of strigils, especially common in Greek and Roman contexts, confirm that this practice was widespread and routine. Olive oil thus became part of everyday cleanliness rather than an occasional treatment. Medical texts from ancient Egypt, Greece, and Rome consistently mention olive oil as a base substance in healing practices. Egyptian medical papyri describe oils mixed with herbs to soothe wounds, reduce dryness, and protect the skin from harsh environmental conditions. In Greek medicine, writers such as Hippocrates referred to olive oil as a useful agent for maintaining bodily balance. Roman medical authors continued these traditions, recording olive oil as an ingredient in remedies for joint pain, skin irritation, and digestive discomfort. These references show that olive oil was trusted not because of theory alone, but because of repeated practical results observed over generations. Daily health practices in the ancient world were deeply connected to prevention rather than cure. Olive oil supported this approach by protecting the body from dryness, cracking, and infection. Applied regularly, it formed a barrier against dust and sun, particularly important for people who worked outdoors. This preventive use meant that olive oil was consumed steadily, not only when illness occurred. Its presence in everyday health routines further reinforced its status as a necessity rather than a specialized medicine. Roman bath culture expanded the role of olive oil even further. Public baths were designed not only for cleanliness but for health maintenance. Before bathing, individuals applied oil to soften the skin and loosen dirt. Afterward, oil was again used to restore moisture. This repeated use across large populations created constant demand. Bath complexes required reliable oil supplies, and this need supported large-scale production and distribution. Olive oil thus became essential to public health infrastructure, linking personal hygiene to imperial economic systems. Historical evidence also suggests that olive oil was used in care for the young and the elderly. Infants were often rubbed with oil to protect their skin, while older individuals used oil to ease stiffness and discomfort. These practices appear in both textual descriptions and artistic representations, indicating their familiarity. Olive oil's gentle nature made it suitable for daily use across all ages, further embedding it into the rhythm of life. Religious ideas about purity and cleanliness reinforce these practices. In many ancient cultures, physical cleanliness was associated with moral or spiritual order. Olive oil, used to cleanse and protect the body, fit naturally into these beliefs. Ritual washing and preparation often included oil, blurring the line between hygiene and religious observance. This overlap strengthened olive oil's role in maintaining both physical and symbolic health. From a historical perspective, olive oil's importance in health and hygiene explains much of its widespread adoption. It required no complex preparation, stored well, and addressed multiple needs simultaneously. As populations grew and cities expanded, these qualities became even more valuable. Olive oil supported daily cleanliness, prevented common ailments, and integrated smoothly into existing cultural practices. Its steady use over centuries reflects a deep reliance built on experience rather than theory. By serving as cleanser, protector, and remedy, olive oil became inseparable from ancient concepts of health. Its presence in medical texts, household routines, and public facilities shows that it was not an optional treatment, but a foundation of everyday well-being across the ancient world. Historical evidence shows that olive oil held a central place in religious and ritual life across many ancient cultures, reinforcing its importance beyond practical daily use. In societies where religion shaped nearly every aspect of life, substances used in sacred contexts gained deep meaning. Olive oil, already familiar in homes and workplaces, naturally became part of ritual practice. Its clean burn, pleasant scent, and preservative qualities made it suitable for offerings, anointing, and sacred light. This consistent ritual use strengthened the association between olive oil and ideas of purity, continuity, and divine order. In ancient Egypt, oils were essential to religious ceremonies and burial practices. Temple rituals required lamps that burned steadily, and olive oil was valued for this purpose. Oils were also used in the preparation of bodies for burial, believed to protect and preserve the physical form for the afterlife. Religious texts and tomb art show priests applying oils during ceremonies, linking olive oil to sacred transition and protection. Although Egypt produced other oils as well, imported olive oil gained importance because of its stability and symbolic connection to preservation, aligning closely with Egyptian beliefs about eternity. In ancient Greece, olive oil became deeply connected to religious identity and myth. The olive tree itself was considered sacred, associated with the goddess Athena and the founding of Athens. Temples maintained oil lamps that burned continuously, symbolizing order and divine presence. Olive oil was poured as offerings during ceremonies and festivals, reinforcing its role as a bridge between human life and the gods. Historical laws protected sacred olive groves, reflecting their religious and civic importance. These protections ensured that olive oil production remained stable, supporting both worship and daily life. Roman religious practice continued and expanded these traditions. Temples across the empire relied on olive oil for lighting and offerings, creating constant demand. Religious festivals involved processions and rituals where oil played a symbolic role. Olive oil was also used in rites of passage, including birth, coming of age, and death. These repeated uses made olive oil a familiar presence at key moments of life, strengthening its emotional and cultural significance. Its ritual role reinforced the idea that olive oil was essential not only to survival, but to meaning. Household religion further embedded olive oil into daily routine. Small shrines within homes used oil lamps and offerings to honor household gods. Families maintained these practices daily, making olive oil part of private spiritual life, as well as public worship. This continuity between household and temple practices ensured that olive oil remained constantly in use. Religious duty and daily habit blended together, reinforcing dependence on the same resource. From a historical perspective, olive oil's ritual importance helped protect its production and distribution during times of change. Even when political or economic conditions shifted, religious demand remained steady. This stability supported long-term cultivation and trade. Olive oil's sacred role ensured that it was treated with respect and care, reinforcing its place at the center of ancient life. By serving both practical and sacred needs, olive oil occupied a unique position in ancient societies. It illuminated temples, marked sacred moments, and connected daily routine to spiritual belief. This dual role strengthened its essential status, ensuring that olive oil remained woven into the fabric of ancient life across cultures and centuries. Historical evidence shows that the growing importance of olive oil in daily life was closely tied to the development of long-distance trade across the ancient world. As early civilizations expanded their contacts beyond local regions, olive oil became one of the most reliable goods to transport. Its ability to remain stable for long periods without spoiling made it ideal for trade by sea and land. Archaeological discoveries of amphorae, the large clay containers used for transport, reveal that olive oil moved regularly across the Mediterranean, connecting producers and consumers separated by great distances. These containers were designed specifically to protect oil during travel, reflecting its value and the care taken to preserve it. Ancient maritime trade routes played a central role in spreading olive oil. Ships carried oil from regions rich in olive groves, such as Greece, southern Italy, North Africa, and the eastern Mediterranean, to areas where production was limited or impossible. Ports became key points of exchange, where olive oil was unloaded, stored, and redistributed. Historical records and shipwreck finds show amphorae filled with olive oil stacked carefully in cargo holds, indicating that oil was a planned and significant part of trade shipments rather than a minor addition. This steady movement ensured that olive oil reached both urban and rural populations far from its source. Land routes also supported the spread of olive oil. Roman roads, built to support administration and military movement, were equally important for trade. Carts and pack animals carried oil inland from ports to towns, farms, and military camps. This distribution network allowed olive oil to become part of daily life even in regions where olive trees could not grow. Soldiers, administrators, and settlers carried their habits with them, reinforcing demand and encouraging further trade. Olive oil thus followed the paths of empire and settlement, becoming a shared element of everyday routine. Economic records suggest that olive oil was traded in large quantities in standardized units. Amphorae often bore stamps indicating origin, producer, or quality, showing that oil was part of an organized commercial system. These markings allowed buyers to identify trusted sources, reinforcing stability in trade relationships. Olive oil's role as a dependable commodity helped support market economies and encouraged regular exchange between regions. Its trade value rested not on luxury appeal but on consistent demand for daily use. Trade in olive oil also influenced regional specialization. Areas well suited to olive cultivation focused heavily on oil production, while other regions relied on imports. This specialization encouraged cooperation rather than competition, strengthening economic ties across the ancient world. Olive oil thus became part of a shared economic structure, linking distant communities through routine exchange. The predictability of olive oil demand allowed farmers and traders to plan for the future, supporting long-term stability. From a historical perspective, olive oil's success in trade explains its lasting presence in ancient life. It moved easily, stored well, and served essential functions wherever it arrived. As trade networks expanded, olive oil traveled with them, reinforcing common daily practices across cultures. Whether used for food, light, hygiene, or ritual, its arrival reshaped local routines and connected distant regions through shared dependence. By the height of ancient trade networks, olive oil was no longer tied only to the lands where olives grew. It had become a truly widespread resource, sustained by organized transport and constant demand. Its steady movement across seas and roads ensured that olive oil remained an essential part of daily life across the ancient world, quietly linking households, markets, and cultures through ordinary use. Historical sources indicate that olive oil became an important component of military life, as ancient states expanded and maintained standing forces far from home. Armies required supplies that were durable, versatile, and familiar to soldiers drawn from agrarian societies. Olive oil met these needs well. It could be transported over long distances, stored for extended periods, and used for multiple purposes. Military records and archaeological evidence from camps and forts show oil lamps, storage vessels, and cooking equipment designed for oil use. These findings suggest that olive oil was not an occasional luxury for soldiers, but a regular part of daily routine. In Roman military organization, logistics were carefully planned to support troops across vast territories. Olive oil featured prominently in supply systems because it supported cooking, lighting, and hygiene within camps. Soldiers prepared simple meals based on grain and vegetables, often enriched with oil to increase energy intake. At night, oil lamps provided steady light inside tents and barracks, allowing guards to keep watch and administrators to work after sunset. This reliance on oil lamps made olive oil essential to maintaining order and routine within military settlements. Hygiene practices within the military further reinforced olive oil's importance. Soldiers used oil to clean their bodies after training and combat, especially in environments where water was limited. The same scraping methods used in civilian life were applied in camps, supported by the widespread presence of strigils found in military contexts. Olive oil helped protect skin from exposure, reducing discomfort and maintaining physical readiness. These practices reflect continuity between civilian and military life, showing how deeply olive oil was embedded in everyday habits. Frontier settlements and military colonies also depended on olive oil to recreate familiar daily life in distant lands. As soldiers settled in new regions, they brought their routines with them. Archaeological evidence from forts along Roman frontiers reveals storage facilities for oil and lamps, similar to those found in urban centers. This continuity helped maintain morale and discipline, reinforcing shared identity through daily practices. Olive oil thus supported not only physical needs, but also cultural stability within military communities. Economic links between military demand and agricultural production further strengthened olive oil's role. Large estates supplying the army produced oil specifically for military use, integrating rural economies into imperial logistics. Contracts and supply routes ensured regular delivery, demonstrating how olive oil production was tied to state needs. This connection provided stability for producers while guaranteeing consistent supply for troops. Olive oil's versatility made it especially valuable in this context, reducing the need for multiple specialized goods. From a historical perspective, the use of olive oil in military life illustrates its transformation into an institutional necessity. It supported daily routines, hygiene, and order within highly structured environments. As armies moved, olive oil moved with them, spreading established practices to new regions. This movement reinforced olive oil's place in daily life across the ancient world, ensuring that even at the edges of empire, familiar routines continued. By serving the practical needs of soldiers and settlers alike, olive oil helped sustain expansion and stability. Its presence in camps, forts, and frontier towns demonstrates how deeply it was woven into the fabric of ancient society. Olive oil was not merely carried as a supply, it was carried as part of everyday life, shaping routine wherever ancient armies went. Historical evidence shows that olive oil gradually became the foundation of household cooking traditions across much of the ancient Mediterranean world. Diets in ancient societies relied heavily on grains, legumes, vegetables, and small amounts of meat or fish. Olive oil played a crucial role in transforming these simple ingredients into nourishing daily meals. Archaeological remains of kitchens, cooking vessels, and storage jars consistently indicate the presence of oil in domestic spaces. This suggests that olive oil was not reserved for special occasions, but was used regularly, shaping the everyday food culture of ancient households. In ancient Greece, olive oil was central to cooking practices because it complemented the grain-based diet, common among all social classes. Bread dipped in oil, vegetables cooked with oil, and simple stews enriched with oil were common meals. These foods provided the energy needed for physical labor and daily activity. Written sources and material evidence suggest that olive oil was valued not for complexity, but for reliability. Its ability to enhance nutrition without requiring elaborate preparation made it essential in households where time and resources were limited. This practicality ensured its consistent use generation after generation. Roman cooking traditions further expanded the role of olive oil. Roman kitchens relied on oil for frying, roasting, and preserving foods. Olive oil was used to store herbs, vegetables, and even certain meats, extending their usability. Historical cookery texts and kitchen remains show that oil was a standard ingredient rather than a luxury. Even when wealthier households experimented with complex dishes, olive oil remained a base element. Poorer households also depended on it, using small amounts carefully to support daily nourishment. This universality demonstrates how olive oil crossed social boundaries through shared necessity. Regional variations in ancient cooking also highlight olive oil's adaptability. In coastal regions, oil was combined with fish and seafood, while inland communities paired it with grains and vegetables. Despite these differences, the presence of olive oil remained constant. Its mild flavor and stability allowed it to integrate easily into local food traditions without replacing them. This adaptability encouraged its widespread adoption across diverse cultures, reinforcing its role as a unifying element in ancient diets. The storage of olive oil within households further reflects its importance. Large ceramic jars were designed specifically to protect oil from heat and contamination. These vessels were often kept in cool, shaded areas of the home, indicating careful management of this resource. Families monitored oil supplies closely, planning usage across seasons. This careful storage practice highlights how essential olive oil was to household survival, especially during periods when fresh food was scarce. From a historical perspective, olive oil's role in cooking explains much of its enduring presence in ancient life. It provided calories, improved food preservation, and supported a wide range of cooking methods. These benefits were practical and immediate, reinforcing daily dependence. Olive oil did not require explanation or justification. Its value was proven at every meal. As ancient societies evolved, cooking traditions adapted, but olive oil remained central. It linked generations through shared taste and routine. The simple act of preparing food with oil connected households across time and geography, ensuring that olive oil remained an essential element of daily life throughout the ancient world. Historical analysis shows that although olive oil was used across all levels of ancient society, The way it was accessed and consumed reflected differences in wealth, status, and social structure. Olive oil was not a rare luxury, but it was still a managed resource, and its quantity and quality varied depending on household means. Wealthier families owned land with olive groves or had direct access to large supplies through trade and estates. Poorer households relied on markets, small-scale purchases, or shared community resources. Despite these differences, olive oil remained a common necessity, linking social classes through shared daily dependence, rather than separating them through exclusivity. In elite households, olive oil was stored in large quantities and used freely for cooking, lighting, bathing, and ritual. Archaeological evidence from wealthy homes shows extensive storage facilities and multiple lamps, indicating steady consumption. These households often used higher quality oil, carefully filtered and imported from well-known regions. Olive oil also played a role in displaying order and refinement, as clean lighting, regular bathing, and well-prepared food were markers of status. Even so, the oil itself was not viewed as a luxury item, but as a foundation upon which more elaborate lifestyles were built. Among working and lower-income households, olive oil was used more carefully but no less regularly. Smaller storage jars and simple lamps found in modest dwellings suggest careful measurement and controlled use. Families planned oil consumption closely, ensuring that essential needs such as cooking and lighting were met before other uses. Historical market records indicate that oil could be purchased in small quantities, making it accessible even to those with limited means. This accessibility ensured that olive oil remained a shared element of daily life across society, reinforcing common routines despite economic differences. Social institutions also influenced access to olive oil. In large cities, state distributions and employer provisions sometimes included oil, particularly in public institutions, military settings, or large estates. These distributions helped stabilize urban populations and support labor. Olive oil's inclusion in such systems reflects its recognition as a basic necessity. It was valued not for prestige, but for its role in maintaining daily function and health. This institutional support reduced extreme disparities in access and ensured widespread availability. Regional production patterns further shaped social experience. In areas where olive trees grew locally, households often had direct or indirect access to oil through family land or community presses. In regions dependent on imports, oil was purchased through markets and trade networks. Despite these differences, historical evidence shows that olive oil reached nearly all populations involved in Mediterranean trade. Its movement across regions helped standardize daily practices, creating a shared material culture that crossed class and geographic boundaries. Written sources from antiquity rarely describe olive oil as a marker of wealth in itself. Instead, wealth was expressed through land ownership, quantity, and variety of goods. Olive oil appears in records as a given, expected presence in households of all types. This absence of emphasis suggests that olive oil's importance was assumed rather than highlighted. Its role was so fundamental that it did not require explanation. This quiet ubiquity is a strong indicator of its essential status. From a historical perspective, olive oil's presence across social classes reveals how ancient societies balanced inequality with shared necessity. While access differed in scale and quality, the basic functions of olive oil remained the same for everyone. Cooking, lighting, hygiene, and ritual depended on it regardless of status. This shared reliance helped maintain social cohesion, as daily routines remained familiar across divisions of wealth. By existing simultaneously as a common necessity and a managed resource, olive oil illustrates how ancient economies functioned in practice. It was not evenly distributed, yet it was widely available. Its steady presence in all households ensured that daily life followed similar patterns across society. This continuity contributed to cultural stability, making olive oil a quiet but powerful force, shaping everyday experience in the ancient world. Historical evidence shows that olive oil was deeply connected to gender roles and household labor in the ancient world, shaping daily responsibilities in subtle but consistent ways. In most ancient societies, the household functioned as the center of production, care, and routine, and olive oil was present in nearly all of these activities. Women were typically responsible for managing food preparation, household cleanliness, and care for family members, and olive oil played a central role in each of these tasks. This regular handling of oil made it an everyday material through which domestic order was maintained. In food preparation, olive oil required careful management. Historical kitchen remains suggest that households measured oil thoughtfully, balancing daily needs with long-term storage. Women oversaw this balance, ensuring that oil supplies lasted across seasons. Cooking with oil was not a single act, but a repeated routine tied to daily meals. This repetition reinforced olive oil's place at the heart of household life. The consistency of these practices across regions indicates that olive oil was not merely an ingredient, but a structural element of domestic work. Household lighting further connected olive oil to daily labor. Oil lamps required regular refilling, cleaning, and maintenance. Historical evidence from domestic spaces shows lamps placed strategically to provide light for evening tasks such as weaving, repairing tools, or preparing food. Maintaining these lamps was part of routine household management. Olive oil therefore extended the productive day beyond daylight hours, supporting domestic work and reinforcing its importance within the household economy. Olive oil was also central to caring roles within the family. Historical medical texts and household practices show oil used to protect skin, soothe injuries, and care for children and the elderly. These tasks fell largely within domestic responsibility. The repeated use of oil in caregiving reinforced its association with protection and maintenance of well-being. Over time, this connection strengthened olive oil's symbolic link to nurture and continuity within the family structure. In agricultural households, olive oil connected domestic and rural labor. Families involved in olive cultivation experienced the full cycle of production, from harvesting to pressing to storage. Women participated in processing and managing the oil once produced, integrating agricultural output into daily household use. This integration ensured that olive oil remained central, not only at the point of production, but throughout daily life. The labor invested in oil reinforced its value and discouraged waste, further embedding it into routine practice. From a historical perspective, olive oil's role in household labor reveals how essential materials shape social structure. Daily interaction with oil made it a familiar substance tied to responsibility, care, and routine. Its presence supported the smooth functioning of households, which in turn supported broader social stability. Olive oil did not simply support life, it organized it. Across the ancient world, The repeated handling of olive oil within domestic spaces ensured its permanence. Generations grew up observing the same routines, reinforcing continuity. Olive oil became part of learned behavior, passed down through daily example rather than instruction. This quiet transmission ensured that olive oil remained essential across centuries, rooted firmly in the structure of everyday life. Historical evidence shows that olive oil accompanied individuals through every stage of life in the ancient world, from early childhood to old age, becoming a constant presence that marked the passage of time. In infancy, olive oil was commonly used to protect delicate skin from dryness and irritation. Ancient medical texts and household practices describe oil being gently applied to newborns, a practice believed to strengthen the body and provide protection against harsh environmental conditions. This early use introduced olive oil as one of the first materials a person encountered in daily life, linking it to care and survival from the very beginning. As children grew, olive oil continued to play a role in everyday routines. Meals prepared with oil provided essential nourishment for growing bodies, especially in societies where diets depended heavily on grains and vegetables. Olive oil added energy and helped sustain children through physical activity and daily labor. Historical household records and archaeological kitchen remains suggest that children learned familiarity with oil simply by observing its constant use. Watching adults pour oil into lamps, mix it into food, and apply it to the body created a sense of normalcy around the substance. Olive oil was not taught as important. Its importance was learned through repetition. During adolescence, olive oil became connected to social preparation and physical development. In Greek contexts, young men training in gymnasia used olive oil as part of athletic practice, while young women encountered oil through domestic responsibilities and personal care. Although roles differed by gender, olive oil remained central in both cases. Its use supported physical strength, cleanliness, and discipline, values highly regarded in ancient societies. Historical art and literature reflect these practices, showing oil as part of preparation for adult responsibility rather than a separate ritual. In adulthood, olive oil became deeply tied to work, family life, and routine. Adults relied on oil daily for cooking, lighting, hygiene, and health maintenance. For parents, olive oil became part of caregiving, used again for the next generation, just as it had been used for them. This repetition created continuity across time. Olive oil moved quietly through generations, unchanged in purpose even as societies evolved. Its role was reinforced not by ceremony, but by constant necessity. In later life, olive oil took on renewed importance as a source of comfort and care. Historical medical writings describe oil used to ease joint stiffness, soothe dry skin, and support aging bodies. Older individuals relied on olive oil for warmth, nourishment, and relief from physical strain accumulated over years of labor. These practices appear consistently across regions, suggesting shared understanding of olive oil's benefits. Its gentle nature made it suitable for continued daily use, reinforcing its association with endurance and longevity. Burial practices further reflect olive oil's role in marking the end of life. In several ancient cultures, oils were applied to the body during preparation for burial, symbolizing care, respect, and preservation. This final use mirrored its first use in infancy, creating a symbolic cycle. Olive oil thus framed the human lifespan, present at birth, throughout life, and in death. This continuity strengthened its cultural significance and ensured its persistence across generations. From a historical perspective, olive oil's presence throughout the life cycle explains its deep integration into ancient society. It was not tied to a single age or function, but adapted to changing needs over time. This adaptability allowed it to remain essential regardless of social role or physical condition. Olive oil became part of what it meant to live an ordinary life in the ancient world, quietly supporting each stage without drawing attention to itself. By accompanying individuals from birth to death, olive oil achieved a unique position among ancient resources. Its constant presence created familiarity, trust, and dependence. This lifelong relationship ensured that olive oil was not replaced or forgotten, but carried forward as a fundamental element of daily life across the ancient world. Historical records show that olive oil was not only a daily necessity, but also deeply connected to law, property, and inheritance in the ancient world. Because olive trees required many years to mature and could produce fruit for generations, they became symbols of long-term value and stability. Legal documents from ancient Greece and Rome show that olive groves were carefully recorded as property, often passed down within families over long periods of time. Ownership of olive trees represented security, future income, and social standing, making olive oil production a legally protected activity rather than a casual form of farming. In ancient Greece, laws existed specifically to protect olive trees from damage or theft. Historical sources describe restrictions on cutting olive trees, especially those considered sacred or essential to the community. These laws reflect how valuable olive oil production had become to both household survival and the wider economy. Because olive oil supported daily food, lighting, and ritual life, its source needed protection. Legal attention ensured continuity of supply and discouraged actions that could threaten long-term stability. Olive oil thus entered the legal system not as a trade good alone, but as a foundation of social order. Roman law further formalized the importance of olive oil through detailed regulations on land ownership and inheritance. Agricultural estates producing olive oil were documented carefully, and rights to groves were transferred through wills and family agreements. Olive trees were often mentioned specifically in inheritance records, indicating their recognized value. Because these trees could outlive their owners, they represented continuity between generations. Families planned inheritance with olive groves in mind, ensuring that future members would continue to benefit from the land's productivity. Legal disputes over land often included olive groves as central points of contention. Historical court records and legal writings suggest that conflicts over olive-producing land were taken seriously due to their economic importance. The state's involvement in resolving such disputes shows how essential olive oil had become to daily life. Protecting access to oil meant protecting food supply, household stability, and economic continuity. Olive oil's presence within legal structures reinforced its essential status beyond the household. In some regions, olive oil production was also tied to tax systems. Historical evidence suggests that land producing olives could be assessed differently due to its long-term value. This integration into taxation further demonstrates how deeply olive oil was embedded in administrative thinking. The state recognized that olive oil production supported not only individual households, but also broader economic systems. Regulation ensured consistent output and supported trade networks that depended on reliable supply. From a historical perspective, The legal treatment of olive oil reveals its importance as a stabilizing force. Law exists to protect what societies value most, and the careful protection of olive trees and groves shows how essential olive oil had become. It was not easily replaced nor quickly produced and therefore required long-term planning. Legal systems reflected this reality by embedding olive oil into rules of ownership, inheritance, and dispute resolution. By becoming part of law and property, olive oil moved beyond daily habit into institutional permanence. Its production and distribution were safeguarded not only by custom, but by formal authority. This legal recognition ensured that olive oil would continue to flow through ancient societies across generations, remaining an essential element of daily life long after individual lives had passed. Historical evidence shows that olive oil was not only a material resource in the ancient world, but also a subject of learning passed carefully from one generation to the next. Knowledge about olive cultivation, oil production, storage, and use was rarely written down in early periods. Instead, it was learned through observation, repetition, and shared labor. Children grew up watching adults tend olive trees, harvest fruit, press oil, and manage supplies. Through this daily exposure, olive oil became part of inherited knowledge, absorbed naturally as part of growing up within an ancient household. Agricultural knowledge surrounding olive trees required patience and long-term thinking. Olive trees took many years to produce fruit, and understanding their care demanded experience rather than quick instruction. Families passed down practical wisdom about pruning, harvesting seasons, soil conditions, and weather patterns. This knowledge ensured consistent oil production across generations. Because mistakes could take years to correct, careful teaching was essential. Olive oil thus became closely tied to generational learning, where elders held authority as keepers of experience, and younger members learned by doing. Within households, the management of olive oil also required instruction. Knowing how much oil to use daily, how much to store for future months, and how to prevent spoilage were practical skills learned gradually. Archaeological evidence of standardized storage vessels suggests that households developed consistent practices over time. These practices were taught informally, through routine rather than explanation. Olive oil use became habitual, reinforcing continuity across generations and regions. In professional contexts, olive oil knowledge extended into specialized skills. Press operators, traders, lamp makers, and potters all relied on understanding oil's properties. Craftspeople learned how oil behaved under different conditions, how it flowed, burned, or preserved materials. This knowledge was transmitted through apprenticeship systems common in the ancient world. Olive oil thus supported not only household learning, but also professional education, shaping skilled labor across societies. Written knowledge, when it developed, also reflected olive oil's importance. Ancient agricultural texts from Greece and Rome included detailed discussions of olive cultivation and oil quality. These writings suggest that by this stage, olive oil knowledge had become formalized enough to record. However, even these texts assumed familiarity, indicating that much understanding still came from lived experience. Written instruction supplemented tradition rather than replacing it. Religious and cultural education further reinforced olive oil's significance. Ritual use taught symbolic meaning alongside practical use. Children observed oil used in ceremonies, offerings, and sacred lighting, linking everyday material knowledge to belief systems. This connection ensured that olive oil knowledge carried emotional and cultural weight, making it more likely to be preserved and respected. From a historical perspective, olive oil's survival across millennia depended heavily on this continuous transfer of knowledge. Its production required care, memory, and consistency. Without generational learning, olive oil cultivation could easily decline. Instead, ancient societies invested in teaching these practices quietly, through daily life. This investment ensured that olive oil remained a stable and reliable resource. By embedding olive oil into education, labor, and tradition, ancient societies secured its place in daily life. Knowledge about olive oil became part of cultural inheritance, passed on alongside land, language, and custom. This deep integration explains why olive oil endured even as political systems changed. It belonged not to rulers or states alone, but to families and communities who carried its knowledge forward through time. Historical evidence shows that the true importance of olive oil in the ancient world became most visible during times of crisis, scarcity, and social change. Droughts, poor harvests, warfare, and political instability regularly disrupted ancient societies. In these moments, resources that were fragile or short-lived disappeared quickly. Olive oil, however, remained relatively stable. Because it could be stored for long periods without spoiling, olive oil provided a measure of security when other food supplies failed. This durability made it a critical resource during uncertainty, reinforcing its value beyond ordinary daily use. Archaeological and textual sources indicate that households carefully protected olive oil reserves during difficult times. When grain harvests were low or trade routes disrupted, families relied on stored oil to supplement limited diets. Olive oil added essential calories and allowed simple foods to remain nourishing even when quantities were reduced. This ability to stretch limited resources helped households survive periods of hardship. Olive oil thus became associated with resilience, not abundance, supporting daily life when conditions were harsh. In times of war, olive oil remained essential to both civilian and military survival. Armies depended on oil for cooking, lighting, hygiene, and health, as shown in military supply records and archaeological remains from camps. Civilian populations living near conflict zones also relied on oil because it could be hidden, transported, or rationed more easily than fresh food. Olive oil's compact value made it practical in unstable environments, allowing families to preserve a sense of normal routine even as external conditions changed. Political transitions also affected olive oil production and distribution. As empires expanded or declined, control of agricultural land shifted. Despite these changes, olive groves often continued to be cultivated. Historical evidence suggests that new rulers recognized the importance of olive oil and maintained existing systems of production and protection. This continuity reflects olive oil's essential role in sustaining daily life, regardless of political authority. Even when administrations changed, olive oil remained a constant presence. Periods of urban decline further highlight olive oil's importance. As cities contracted or infrastructure weakened, centralized supply systems became unreliable. In these conditions, households with access to stored oil or local production were better able to adapt. Olive oil supported basic needs when public services failed. Its use in cooking, lighting, and hygiene helped preserve domestic stability, even as public order weakened. This adaptability, ensured olive oil's continued relevance across changing social landscapes. Historical analysis also shows that olive oil played a role in recovery after crisis. Once stability returned, existing olive groves allowed communities to rebuild routines quickly. Unlike crops that required replanting each season, olive trees continued producing fruit year after year. This continuity supported economic recovery and renewed trade. Olive oil thus bridged periods of disruption, connecting past stability to future renewal. From a historical perspective, olive oil's importance during crisis explains why ancient societies invested so heavily in its protection and transmission. It was not simply a resource for times of comfort, but a foundation for survival. Its presence during hardship reinforced trust in its value, ensuring that it remained central to daily life even as societies changed. By enduring drought, war, and political transition, olive oil proved itself indispensable. Its quiet reliability allowed ancient people to maintain routine, nourishment, and care in uncertain times. This resilience ensured that olive oil remained woven into daily life across the ancient world, not only in prosperity, but in survival. Historical evidence shows that beyond its practical uses, olive oil became deeply embedded in symbolism, identity, and cultural memory across the ancient world. Over centuries of continuous use, olive oil came to represent stability, peace, and continuity. This symbolic meaning did not replace its practical importance, but grew naturally from it. Because olive oil was present in daily life from birth to death, its meaning was shaped by familiarity rather than abstraction. It symbolized ordinary life sustained over time rather than rare or dramatic moments. In ancient Greece, olive oil became closely tied to civic identity. The olive tree was associated with the founding myths of cities and the protection of the community. Sacred olive groves were preserved not only for economic reasons, but because they represented the endurance of the city itself. Olive oil used in festivals, games, and rituals reinforced shared identity among citizens. These repeated public uses ensured that olive oil carried collective meaning, connecting individual households to the wider social body. Roman culture expanded this symbolic role through imperial identity. Olive oil production became associated with order, prosperity, and civilization itself. Regions that produced olive oil were considered productive and stable, while its presence in distant provinces signaled integration into Roman life. Olive oil thus became a marker of belonging. Its use in public baths, temples, and households reinforced a shared way of living that transcended regional differences. This shared material culture helped unify diverse populations under common routines. Cultural memory preserved olive oil's importance even as political structures changed. After the decline of centralized authority in some regions, olive oil continued to be produced and used according to long-established customs. This continuity suggests that olive oil belonged more to cultural memory than to any specific state. Families continued to plant olive trees, press oil, and pass down knowledge because these practices were tied to identity and tradition rather than governance. Literary and artistic sources reflect olive oil's symbolic role indirectly. Olive branches, oil lamps, and scenes of daily domestic life appear frequently in ancient art. These representations highlight olive oil's association with peace, care, and continuity. Rather than portraying olive oil as extraordinary, artists depicted it as familiar and constant. This familiarity reinforced its symbolic power, grounding meaning in everyday experience. From a historical perspective, symbolism surrounding olive oil developed gradually through repetition. Unlike symbols imposed by authority, olive oil's meaning emerged from lived experience. Its reliability during hardship, its presence in ritual, and its role in sustaining daily life all contributed to its cultural weight. Over time, olive oil came to represent the values that ancient societies prized most: endurance, balance, and continuity. By becoming part of collective identity and memory, olive oil secured its place beyond practicality. Even when new materials and practices emerged, olive oil retained meaning because it was tied to how people understood their past. This deep cultural embedding ensured that olive oil remained essential not only as a resource, but as a symbol of ordinary life carried forward through generations. Historical evidence shows that as the ancient world moved into late antiquity, olive oil remained a stable element of daily life, even while political, economic, and social structures changed. From the 3rd to the 7th centuries, large empires faced pressure from internal instability, shifting borders, and reduced long-distance trade. Despite these changes, olive oil production and use continued across many regions. This continuity demonstrates how deeply olive oil had become embedded in everyday routines, independent of centralized power. While state systems weakened in some areas, household practices surrounding olive oil remained largely unchanged. In late Roman and early Byzantine contexts, olive oil continued to support daily needs such as cooking, lighting, and hygiene. Archaeological evidence from domestic spaces shows continued use of oil lamps and storage vessels, similar to those used in earlier centuries. Even as urban centers contracted, olive oil remained present in smaller towns and rural settlements. Its ability to be produced locally or stored long-term made it adaptable to changing conditions. This adaptability allowed communities to maintain familiar routines despite broader social transformation. Religious institutions during this period also played a role in preserving olive oil's importance. Churches and monasteries required oil for lamps and ritual use, continuing practices inherited from earlier religious traditions. These institutions often owned land, including olive groves ensuring ongoing production. Olive oil thus remained part of both daily worship and practical life. Its role in religious settings helped stabilize demand and encouraged continued cultivation, even when commercial trade declined. Economic shifts during late antiquity altered trade networks, but olive oil production adjusted rather than disappeared. In regions where long-distance trade became less reliable, local production gained importance. Small-scale presses and household-level processing became more common. This decentralization did not reduce olive oil's importance, but changed how it was accessed. Olive oil remained essential because it continued to meet multiple daily needs simultaneously. Its versatility ensured that communities prioritized its production, even when resources were limited. Historical records from early medieval Mediterranean societies indicate that olive oil remained central to food preparation and lighting. While diets and material culture evolved, olive oil continued to support basic nourishment and daily routine. The survival of olive cultivation techniques through this period shows the strength of generational knowledge. Families and communities preserved skills related to olive trees and oil production because they remained useful and necessary. This preservation ensured continuity across centuries of change. From a historical perspective, olive oil's endurance through late antiquity highlights its role as a stabilizing force. While political authorities shifted and economies restructured, olive oil remained tied to daily life rather than state systems. Its importance was rooted in habit, necessity, and familiarity. This grounding allowed olive oil to bridge the ancient and early medieval worlds without losing relevance. By continuing to serve cooking, lighting, health, and ritual needs, olive oil carried ancient practices forward into new historical periods. Its quiet persistence illustrates how essential materials can outlast empires. Olive oil did not require revival or reform. It simply continued. Through this continuity, olive oil remained a thread connecting ancient daily life to the worlds that followed. Historical evidence shows that olive oil served as a continuous bridge between the ancient world and the early medieval period, carrying daily practices forward even as societies transformed. As political authority fragmented in parts of the former Roman world, everyday life became more localized. Large urban centers declined, long-distance trade reduced, and communities relied increasingly on regional resources. In this environment, olive oil retained its importance because it was already embedded in household routine. Families continued to cook with it, light their homes with it, and care for their bodies using it, not because of tradition alone, but because it remained practical and familiar. In Mediterranean regions where olive trees continued to grow, cultivation persisted despite changing conditions. Archaeological evidence from rural settlements indicates ongoing maintenance of olive groves and presses. These sites suggest that even when administrative systems weakened, agricultural knowledge remained strong. Olive oil production adapted to smaller scales, often centered around family or village-level presses. This shift ensured that olive oil remained available for daily needs without reliance on distant markets. Its continued production reflects how deeply it was woven into survival strategies rather than dependent on empire. In areas where olive oil had previously been imported, its presence declined but did not disappear entirely. Historical records suggest that communities adjusted usage, reserving oil for essential functions such as cooking and lighting. Substitutes were sometimes used, but olive oil remained preferred whenever available. This preference indicates how deeply ancient habits influenced early medieval life. Olive oil was not easily replaced because daily routines had been shaped around it for centuries. Religious continuity further preserved olive oil's role during this transition. Christian worship adopted many practices that required oil for lamps and rituals, continuing earlier traditions. Churches and monasteries maintained olive groves where possible, ensuring supply for both spiritual and practical use. These institutions became centers of continuity, preserving agricultural knowledge and reinforcing olive oil's importance in daily and sacred life alike. Olive oil thus remained present even as religious frameworks evolved. Historical analysis also shows that olive oil helped maintain a sense of continuity and identity during uncertain times. Familiar routines grounded communities when larger political identities shifted. Preparing food with oil, lighting a lamp at dusk, or caring for the body using oil connected people to past generations. These actions required no explanation and offered stability through repetition. Olive oil became part of cultural memory carried forward through daily habit rather than formal instruction. From a historical perspective, olive oil's survival through this transitional period demonstrates its role as more than an ancient resource. It functioned as a stabilizing element that helped societies adapt without losing connection to the past. While institutions rose and fell, olive oil remained rooted in the home. This grounding ensured that ancient practices did not vanish, but flowed naturally into new historical contexts. By continuing to serve essential needs, olive oil preserved a sense of ordinary life across centuries of change. Its presence linked ancient routines with early medieval ones, ensuring continuity in daily experience, even as the world transformed. Olive oil thus remained essential not because it symbolized the past, but because it continued to support the present. Historical analysis shows that olive oil's lasting importance was not the result of chance, but of long-term usefulness proven again and again across centuries. As societies moved further away from the classical ancient world, many materials and customs disappeared or changed significantly. Olive oil did not. Its continued presence in daily life reveals how deeply it had become integrated into fundamental human needs. Cooking, lighting, hygiene, health, and ritual all relied on it, and no single alternative could replace all these functions at once. This combination of versatility and reliability explains why olive oil endured when other ancient practices faded. One key reason for olive oil's survival was its close relationship with the Mediterranean environment. Olive trees thrived in conditions common across large regions, allowing production to continue even when political borders shifted. Historical evidence shows that families maintained olive groves across generations because the trees themselves required long-term care and rewarded patience with steady yield. This agricultural stability ensured that olive oil remained available locally, reducing dependence on fragile trade systems. Where olive trees survived, olive oil survived with them. Another factor in olive oil's endurance was habit. Daily routines shaped culture more powerfully than formal institutions. For centuries, people cooked with olive oil, lit lamps with it, cleaned their bodies with it, and used it in moments of care and worship. These repeated actions created deeply ingrained habits. Historical continuity shows that even when new foods, fuels, or materials appeared, olive oil remained familiar and trusted. Its use did not require retraining or explanation. It simply continued as it always had. Written and material records from later periods reflect this quiet continuity. Olive oil appears in household inventories, religious records, and agricultural references without special comment. This absence of explanation suggests that its importance was assumed. Olive oil had become part of the background of daily life, so ordinary that it no longer needed emphasis. This invisibility is itself evidence of essential status. Only materials that are constantly present fade into routine. Cultural transmission also supported olive oil's longevity. Knowledge about cultivation, pressing, storage, and use was passed down through families and communities. These skills survived political collapse because they were tied to survival rather than governance. Parents taught children how to tend trees and manage oil supplies because it remained useful. This generational transmission ensured continuity, even when written records were lost or institutions weakened. From a historical perspective, olive oil's legacy lies in its quiet success. It did not dominate through force, symbolism alone, or state enforcement. Instead, It proved itself daily. Each meal prepared, each lamp lit, each body cared for, reinforced its value. Over time, this repetition created trust. Olive oil became essential not through ideology, but through lived experience. By the end of the ancient world and beyond, olive oil was no longer merely an ancient product. It was a constant companion to ordinary life, adaptable to new conditions without losing its purpose. Its endurance across centuries demonstrates how simple materials, when deeply useful, can shape human history more lastingly than grand institutions. Olive oil remained because daily life continued to need it. Historical study of the ancient world shows that olive oil achieved its essential place not through sudden innovation, but through quiet endurance. Across thousands of years, from early Mediterranean communities to the edge of the medieval period, olive oil remained woven into the simplest acts of daily life. It fed families, lit homes, protected bodies, supported health, marked sacred moments, and carried memory across generations. Its importance did not depend on empire, wealth, or ideology. It depended on usefulness proven again and again through ordinary experience. What makes olive oil historically remarkable is not how rare it was, but how constant it became. While political systems rose and collapsed, olive oil remained present in kitchens, lamps, and rituals. This continuity reveals a deeper truth about ancient daily life. The most powerful forces shaping history were often not rulers or battles, but stable routines repeated quietly over centuries. Olive oil belonged to this world of repetition. It supported life without drawing attention to itself, and because of this it endured. Archaeology, law, religion, agriculture, and household remains all point to the same conclusion. Olive oil was essential because it solved many daily needs at once. No other single substance in the ancient world matched its versatility. This made it irreplaceable. Societies protected its production, passed down its knowledge, and adapted its use to new conditions. Even when trade declined or cities shrank, olive oil remained rooted in local life. Its presence did not require renewal. It continued naturally. From a historical perspective, olive oil offers a quiet lesson about continuity. The ancient world did not survive through constant change alone, but through the preservation of what worked. Olive oil worked. It supported nourishment, care, light, and balance. These needs did not disappear, and so neither did olive oil. Through habit and necessity, it became part of what it meant to live an ordinary life. As this history comes to rest, imagine once more an ancient home at the end of the day. A lamp burns softly, fed by olive oil. Food has been prepared, bodies cleaned, and the household settles into quiet. Outside, olive trees stand patiently, as they have for generations. In this still moment, we see why olive oil remained essential. It was never just a product. It was a companion to daily life, steady and enduring. Here we gently close this chapter of history. The story of olive oil does not truly end, but it rests within the long flow of human routine. For now, this ancient world grows quiet, and this journey comes to a calm and complete close.